the young, and the restless spoilers. Victor's relentless escalation against Jabbat had become something far more dangerous than a routine corporate feud. It was a calculated dismantling. A tightening vice meant to suffocate the Abbotts not only financially but psychologically, pushing them toward collapse with a cold precision that only he possessed. What began as power plays soon evolved into strikes at the heart of the family itself, forcing everyone in Genoa City to feel the tremors of his ambition. As the pressure mounted, Diane found herself in an unusual position, watching Jack's exhaustion deepen and Kyle's frustration flare into moments of reckless defiance. And for the first time she sensed that Victor's rage had crossed into something unstable and personal. Even Phyllis, long consumed by her rivalry with Diane, noticed the shift in the earthway. Victor no longer seemed satisfied with winning but appeared intent on breaking his enemies entirely, leaving them with nothing to rebuild. Though Diane and Phyllis had spent years tearing each other apart, neither woman could ignore the truth forming like a shadow around them. Victor had become a threat so large, so unrestrained, that he dwarfed the grudges they once believed defined them. Diane, driven by her instinct for survival and her fierce protectiveness over those she claimed to love, began quietly probing Victor's world, searching for even the smallest crack in his armor. She learned quickly that this was dangerous terrain. Victor's enemies rarely survived long, and his secrets were buried deep beneath layers of intimidation, loyalty, and fear. But Diane was patient, more cunning than people often credited her for, and eventually her persistence led her to a discovery of vulnerability not financial or strategic, but personal, rooted in a recent miscalculation Victor had made while striking out at another rival. It was the kind of flaw that could be exploited, but only by someone who understood manipulation with the same fluency Victor wielded power. Diane realized instantly that she herself could not pull the trigger. Even a whisper of her involvement would prompt Victor to retaliate with a fury that could destroy her, Jack, and Kyle alike. There was only one person ruthless enough, clever enough, and reckless enough to weaponize this against him, Phyllis Summers. Yet approaching Phyllis felt like playing with fire. Diane knew that every mistake she had ever made with Phyllis lingered like fresh windflies, the betrayals, the constant tug-of-war for Jack's affection, each incident cementing their hostility until it felt immovable. So Diane chose her moment carefully, watching first as Victor executed yet another blow against the Abbotts, one so cruel it shattered any illusions that he still played by the old rules. When Victor orchestrated a maneuver that placed Kyle directly at risk, jeopardizing his position, his reputation, and even the safety of the young man's future, both Diane and Phyllis felt something shift. Jack spiraled into outrage, blindsided by Victor's ruthlessness, and Kyle's sense of betrayal radiated through the family like a crack splintering the walls of Jabbat itself. That was when Diane understood. If she waited any longer, Jack and Kyle might lose everything. So she swallowed her pride, her resentment, and the years of venom between them, and sought out Phyllis with a proposition neither woman would have believed possible in any other universe. Phyllis listened, her expression shifting through disbelief, amusement, irritation, and finally something darker, recognition. The idea of teaming up with Diane Abbott felt almost insulting in its absurdity, an alliance forged out of desperation rather than trust. Old memories resurfaced quickly, the heartbreak, the betrayals, the competition that scarred them both. She remembered all the ways Diane had attempted to sabotage her, and all the battles she herself had waged in return. That history rose like a wall between them, urging Phyllis to walk away from this impossible suggestion. But Victor's most recent strike changed everything. When the man reached beyond the corporate battlefield and into the lives of Jack and Kyle, people Phyllis cared about in ways she rarely admitted out loud, something inside her snapped. She saw not the titan of business but a man who believed himself untouchable. A man who had crossed a boundary so unforgivable that even she could no longer pretend her personal grudges mattered more than stopping him. Slowly, reluctantly, Phyllis began to consider the possibility that Diane was right. The threat Victor posed now outweighed any hatred between them. His ambition had grown monstrous, and if no one intervened, the Abbotts would not be the only casualties. Others in Genoa City would inevitably fall under his heel. So Phyllis made a choice she never imagined making. She agreed to join forces with her greatest enemy, not out of loyalty, forgiveness, or newfound friendship, but out of necessity and a deep, fiercely guarded love for the people caught in Victor's crossfire. Their partnership, tentative and brittle, felt like a chemical reaction, volatile, unpredictable, but potentially explosive enough to shatter Victor's sense of invincibility. Together, they began to move in silence, using the cover of their hostility to conceal the truth. Everyone believed they were still at war, which made their alliance invisible, giving them the freedom to plan, observe, and infiltrate Victor's world without suspicion. Diane provided the intel, subtle observations, hidden connections, and the key weakness she had uncovered. Phyllis took that information and reshaped it with her signature boldness, crafting strategies that danced on the edge of danger. Knowing that Victor could never anticipate an attack coordinated by two women he assumed despised each other too deeply to cooperate. They met in secret, often at odd hours and in unexpected places, speaking in low tones as they mapped out ways to undermine Victor's operations without drawing attention. Phyllis used her technological prowess and her gift for psychological manipulation, slipping into networks Victor believed impenetrable and nudging the right people toward the right doubts. Diane used her insight into family loyalties and corporate vulnerabilities, identifying exactly where Victor's empire relied too heavily on illusion and fear. Each woman brought strengths the other lacked. Their differences became weapons rather than obstacles. And as they worked, something unspoken formed between them, not trust, not friendship, but a shared recognition of the power they wielded together. A begrudging respect forged in the crucible of mutual necessity. The deeper they ventured into this alliance, the more dangerous it became. Victor's moves grew more ruthless, more erratic, as if sensing some unseen force rising against him. Jack, unaware of the silent war forming beneath the surface, continued to struggle with the impossible choices Victor forced upon him, while Kyle walked a path lined with traps that could destroy his future. Every new strike from Victor increased the urgency of Diane and Phyllis's mission, pushing them to take greater risks, to step closer to lines they swore they would never cross. And yet, neither flinched. They understood fully, if they failed, Victor would crush them without hesitation. But if they succeeded, they would accomplish something no one in Genoa City had ever imagined possible: bring down Victor Newman not with brute force, but with strategy, cunning, and a partnership that defied every rule of their own tangled history. In the end, their collaboration became something almost mythic, the union of two fierce, wounded, complex women who refused to let a tyrant decide the fate of the people they loved. Their plan, meticulously constructed and sharpened by each new wave of danger, promised not just survival for Jack and Kyle, but a reckoning for Victor himself. And as they took the final steps into a battle that neither could fight alone, the city around them continued, unaware that its future hinged not on corporate titans or powerful families, but onto sworn enemies turned unlikely: Elysian and Phyllis standing together in the shadows, choosing to rewrite the rules of war. Diane had always known that Victor Newman was dangerous, but she had never fully understood how deep the darkness ran beneath the surface of his empire until the moment she made the decision to investigate his past. It began quietly, almost innocently, as a strategic measure meant to protect Jack, Kyle, and the fragile stability of the Abbott family. But the further she ventured into the labyrinth of Victor's history, the more she realized she was wandering into territory scarred by decades of manipulation, buried crimes, and carefully erased sins. Diane approached the task with the caution of someone who understood that a single misstep could mean disaster. Victor had eyes everywhere, loyalties planted across Genoa City, and a reputation for destroying anyone who dared trespass into his secrets. Yet Diane persisted, sifting through legal archives, old corporate filings, forgotten personal disputes, and long-settled lawsuits, and sure of what she expected to find. What she eventually uncovered was something worse than she had imagined: a set of obscure, dusty documents buried deep within a private storage archive. Records so old and faded that they seemed forgotten by time itself. But the moment Diane read them, her blood ran cold. The documents referenced an incident decades earlier, a mysterious death quietly ruled an accident despite clear inconsistencies in the reports. Witness statements had vanished, evidence had been reclassified, and the official investigators who once questioned the case abruptly withdrew their concerns. The more she read, the clearer it became that someone powerful had intervened to make the truth disappear. Diane followed the trail further, connecting names and dates that most people would never think twice about, until she stumbled onto the undeniable conclusion. Victor had orchestrated the cover-up of a violent crime that would have destroyed not only his career but the entire Newman dynasty if it had ever surfaced. Diane's hands trembled as she pieced together the implications. The victim's family had been silenced. The officials had been paid off or threatened. A chain of intimidation had been woven so seamlessly that for decades, no one had dared revisit the truth. And if this was the secret Victor had protected so fiercely for so many years, then he would unquestionably go to any lengths to blackmail, to ruin, even to kill to keep it buried forever. The weight of that realization settled into Diane like a storm pressing against her chest. She now held the kind of information that could detonate the Newman Empire in a single blow, but possessing a weapon this powerful also meant she had placed herself directly in Victor's line of fire. She understood instantly that she could not handle this alone. Victor was not a man who could be toppled by simple exposure. He was a strategist, a master manipulator, someone whose ability to spin disaster into advantage bordered on supernatural. Diane needed an Alessandro equally cunning, equally bold, and fearless enough to strike at Victor where it hurt most. There was only one person in Genoa City who fit that description, someone who had waged her own war against Victor for years, someone who despised him with a level of passion Diane herself could never match. So with the documents hidden carefully away, Diane made her way to Phyllis Summers, the woman she had once considered her greatest enemy. Approaching Phyllis was more daunting than exposing Victor. Their shared history was a battlefield littered with betrayals, sabotage, broken families, and wounds that never fully healed. Yet when Diane sat across from Phyllis, she did not speak with bitterness or rivalry, but with a sharp, quiet urgency that instantly captured Phyllis's attention. She explained, piece by piece, what she had found, never showing the documents outright, but painting a vivid picture of the monstrous truth Victor had buried long ago. Phyllis listened with an intensity Diane had rarely seen in her, her mind racing, her eyes narrowing as the implications crystallized. For years Phyllis had dreamed of taking Victor down, of striking back at the man who had humiliated her, dismissed her, manipulated her life with the flick of a wrist. Yet she had never possessed anything that could truly shatter him. Until now. Diane's discovery was not just a vulnerability, was a lethal blow waiting to be delivered. Phyllis felt a surge of exhilaration, a pulsing rush of possibility mixed with danger. She knew that exposing Victor's crime would unleash chaos, but she also knew it was the one chance she might ever get to defeat him. Diane, for her part, had no illusions about their alliance. She didn't expect trust or forgiveness, only necessity. Their partnership was a fragile construct built not on friendship but on mutual interest, a shared recognition that Victor posed a greater threat to both of them than they did to each other. For the first time, they were not as enemies circling the same man, but as women standing on the brink of a war they knew could redefine Genoa City forever. And so they began to plan. Their strategy evolved slowly at first, shaped by fear and calculation, each step weighed against the possibility of discovery. Diane brought the knowledge, the context, the deeper understanding of the Newman Empire's internal dynamics. Phyllis brought the cunning, the resourcefulness, the willingness to manipulate the narrative in ways Diane could never stomach. Together they formed a plan more intricate than either could have conceived alone. They would not expose Victor outright, not yet. They needed to strengthen their position, secure allies without revealing too much, and create a controlled environment in which Victor would be forced into missteps. They knew Victor's greatest weakness wasn't the crime he committed long ago, but his belief that no one could ever outmaneuver him. If they pushed him into a corner strategically, provoking him to lash out, he would leave traces, signatures of guilt, patterns of desperation that would make the old crime impossible to ignore once the truth came to light. They prepared contingencies, alternative routes, and escape plans. They strategized how to leak information anonymously, how to manipulate media narratives, how to trigger investigations without implicating themselves. They considered bringing Jack into the inner circle but ultimately agreed that his moral rigidity would ruin the plan before it began. Kyle was too emotional, Summer too unpredictable. So the alliance remained theirs alone, a dangerous secret forged in the shadows, invisible to the rest of Genoa City. As the plan took shape, something remarkable began to form between them. Not friendship, not trust, but a shared understanding that the stakes they faced were larger than personal grudges. Victor Newman had ruled their lives, their families, and their futures for far too long. This was not simply revenge, it was a reckoning. Diane and Phyllis knew the coming battle would be brutal, that Victor would strike back with a savagery few had ever witnessed. But they also knew they were no longer afraid. They had the truth. They had each other. And most importantly, they had a plan powerful enough to bring down the unbreakable titan of Genoa City. What they didn't yet realize was that once the first move was made, once they set their plan in motion, nothing in their lives or victors would ever be the same. The secret Diane uncovered was not just a crack in the Newman Empire, it was a fault line waiting for the slightest pressure to erupt. And together, Diane and Phyllis were preparing to deliver the earthquake.